to the school. So I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and I'll post a link on D2L. Okay, so here we are. I have a giant slab of clay that is leather hard. I don't know if you can see how I'm kind of moving this around. This one is even a little bit harder leather hard. I might actually use this slab because it's a little, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see how I'm picking it up and it's not bendy at all? This one is probably going to be a little bit easier for me to work with for the sides of my pieces that I don't want to bend. And so I'm going to cut out my capybara piece from this slab. And I like to try and cut things out so that I'm using as much of the slab as possible. So I'm going to like kind of squish this to the edge. The one thing though that you will notice, even like despite all of your best intentions, the edges of your slab are going to get drier faster. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later, maybe after the end of the like building demonstration, about how you're going to dry your slabs out to the leather hard stage. But just kind of stay tuned for that. It might be worth, so I'm going to cut this, and you can see with that other piece of clay, right, when I held it, it went boop, right? This one, on the other hand, I can see I'm even giving it like a little bounce, and it's not bending. But if I were to put some pressure on it, can you see how I can give it a little, you know, bend? So it's still bendable, but it's not floppy bendable. So this clay, I would say, is like medium leather hard. And actually, here, you want it? I'm going to toss it. Grab it, pass it around, and kind of check it out. And then if you want to later, come check it out again. So I'm going to cut my capybara profiles out. And I'm just using this fettling knife that you can find over in the drawers. And I'm trying to make a cut that is 90 degrees or straight up and down. Like I don't want to make an angle, really. So the clay has a little, like, the clay has moisture in it, which means that, here, you ready? Yay! Which means that the paper is just going to kind of stick to it, which is kind of cool. Let's see. Do that. Oh yeah, look at that. You can get a lot of capybara out of that. Maybe that. Okay. Technically, I could use the same template, right? Like I would only technically, if I'm making something that's symmetrical, I only need one. And you might think about doing that. The reason I made you cut out all of your sides is so that you have the ability to lay them out and know the size slab that you need. And that is going to help you not waste clay, or also what's a real bummer is when you have almost enough clay and not quite enough. Okay, so these scraps, these leather hard scraps, are too hard for us to work back into workable clay. So what we're going to do with these leather hard scraps, you can let them dry out if you want to, just keep them in a little pile. We're going to put them in what we call the reclaim bin. And the reclaim bins are back by the sinks and around the corner towards the loading dock. There's a bunch of buckets that are labeled, and they're kind of filled with water and clay, And you're just going to drop, so if you want to like look back there, Steph is back there with her mask on. So you're going to drop your clay into the reclaim bins. And they may plop into a bucket of water. They may plop into a bunch of other scraps. It doesn't matter. That's where we deal with it. But these are the ones, once they get hard like this, then that's where they go. Okay? The other stuff that goes in that is when you have super sloppy clay that can't stand up anymore. And that goes back in those buckets. And so then we stick it all together and make more clay. Okay, so I have Capybara half number 1 and Capybara half number 2, right? And you can see I can hold these and they're not floppy, right? And I want these, the sides, the ones that are that I'm going to be putting together to be nice and firm so that as I work with them, they don't start to bend and fall apart. I don't want them to be too hard. Okay, so I'm going to take my leftover slab. This is a really great consistency now. And I'm going to wrap it up in plastic. So I'm going to try and hold it in that consistency. And now, so I've got my capybaras. I'm going to move this over here. And I'm going to cut out my base. Actually, I could cut it out of that. Yes. So you can stack slabs if you put boards in between them or plastic in between them. All right, so this is the base that I'm going to use. So as you can see, my base is symmetrical. It's bilaterally symmetrical. It doesn't have to be that way. That's just the way that I'm making it. And I'm going to cut, but it has like a little bit of a bend back here. And it's fatter in the butt area, and then it's going to come up to a skinnier part up here. So you do not have to make your pieces symmetrical. There's no requirement for symmetry. I would encourage you to think about how can you utilize clay so that it is living its best life. As in giving it volume and making it stretch and move in really cool ways. Because clay can look like cardboard, right? It could be totally straight up and down. But the cool thing about clay, the really cool thing about clay is that it bends. And it is this juicy, amazing substance that can be really squishy and bendable and flexible and then turn into stone, right? That's the cool thing about clay. Okay, so that's the base. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the part of my piece that's going to go around the edge. Oops, I didn't make it quite long enough. I want it to come up to about right here. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer. But this, oops, can't really see that. So this piece, is going to get attached to both sides of my capybara and become the two sides. And then I will cut out this part. Well, probably this part, and then this part, and then this part separately, and put them together. And I'll show you, I'm going to kind of finish the piece that I started yesterday so that you can see all of the different parts of that. This, because it's going to bend over the back, I'm cutting out from this slab, and I'm going to cut it from the middle-ish section, because the middle part here is actually softer, since it was underneath another slab and it dried a little slower. So a little trick about drying your clay dries. The parts of the clay that are going to dry fastest are the parts that are exposed to the air most. So your edges, right, are going to dry first. But then also any part that is exposed to an absorbent surface. And wood happens to be an absorbent surface. So when you put your slab on a wooden surface, your slab, the wood is going to kind of suck moisture from the slab, and it will very slowly dry out. So one strategy that I might recommend for y'all is to roll out your slabs today. I'm going to pick this up carefully. And to leave them out for as long as you can this afternoon. But then cover them up with plastic just on the top. Have them exposed to the wood. And come in again either tomorrow, maybe Friday. If you don't come in again until Monday, I would probably recommend wrapping them up with plastic on the bottom and the top, because they might get a little too dry. But you can really utilize the time spent on the wood with plastic on top to get your slabs closer to leather hard. And that'll help sort of speed up your process, because these slabs, let's see, I rolled them out yesterday around this time, and I had them out in the open for like 3-4 hours yesterday, and then I covered them up. And so that's how I got them to this consistency. So it takes a little bit of time to do, and you just got to plan ahead for that, right? There are ways of speed drying your clay, but I do not recommend it because clay does not like to be speed dried. All right, so here we are. I've got all of these parts. I'm going to make sure that you can see that okay. If anything happens up here to the screen that you can't see really well, let me know, and I will make adjustments, okay? Like, just let me know. I don't have ears or eyes in the back of my head. I don't have ears in the back of my head either. All right, so I'm going to put these two pieces like this, and then this piece is going to go like that. But how many people have ever played with magnetiles with a kid or as kids, right? The best way to get magnetiles started is by having 3, one on the bottom, one on the side, and one like this to make a corner, right? Then you get that started, and then you can kind of build from there. You can technically get magnetiles to stand like this, and you can technically get slabs to stand like this, but it's way easier if you have them connected in a corner, okay? So that's why I strategically cut these 3 pieces out first, because I'm going to actually attach this piece and this piece to this base piece at the same time. I'm going to get them all ready, and I'm going to try and put them together so that they kind of hold each other up a little bit. Okay, does that make sense? I may have to use this guy to help because this is a little bit flappy, so I don't want it to fall too much on this side, but we'll see how that goes. So what I like to do is to kind of line up my pieces so that I know which sides are going to get connected. And again, remember, clay has a memory. You want it to not bend even in the building process until you're going to bend it into the shape that you want it to bend in. So this part right here and this part right here are going to connect to this and to this. And this part right here is going to connect to this part right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus on something called scoring and slipping, which is the way in which we get clay to stick to itself. And you'll discover that if you press really hard, you can get clay to stick to itself without slipping and scoring, right? And it's even like pretty much on there. But if the second that this dries out, the thing that is sticking this clay together right now is water, right? It's using something called hydrogen bonding. Those hydrogen molecules are sticky and they like to stick to one another. When they're gone, because the water is gone, this is just going to fall right off. So do not be deceived by the stickiness of clay. In order for your walls to stick together, you must slip and score it. Otherwise, you're going to be sad, as my daughter says. I don't want you to be sad. Okay, so I'm going to score. I'm going to use this serrated rib. And I'm scoring on an angle here. I'm kind of taking the edge down because I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. Whoa, that's really close. I'm ultimately going to be putting this edge against this edge in what we call a miter joint, which is when you put two 45-ish degree angles together. So I'm trying to kind of create a 45-degree angled edge here by using my serrated rib to just kind of like knock off that edge. And I'm roughing it up. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And I'm not skimping on this. I think what's important for you to take note of is that I'm not worried about it being pretty. I'm worried about it being rough. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing here. And this clay's a little bit softer, so I don't actually have to push quite as hard. Say it again. Am I okay now? Oh, whoops. I'm going to zoom out so you can see a little bit more. There we go. And thank you. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my brush. So I have a little pile of watery clay. What do we call this again? Slip. And I'm going to paint all of these edges. I'm not really super worried about getting a bunch of clay onto those edges. I'm mostly worried about getting them wet. Although I am getting sticky clay onto those edges while I do this too. We're at the 155 mark. So I'm kind of putting a lot of slip there. And now I'm going to go over all of those edges again. I'm actually going over in the opposite direction to try and like squeeze that slip into the clay, rough it up even more. I'm going to do this on all parts. So before I went like this, and now I'm cross-hatching. I'm going in the opposite direction. And I'm going to go over all of those areas again with more slip to get them nice and sticky. So that when I put them together and squeeze pretty hard, it's going to go, like it's literally going to squish together. Like you'll hear it, you'll see the clay kind of squish out. It's glorious. And your inner 3-year-old is going to love you. All right, so I'm going to start with this one. I'm setting this on the board over here. It's touching right here. And as you can see, because of the way that the bevels are, I can push up against this wall right here and really get that corner. One other thing that's it's a little tricky, but it's a cool phenomena, is that if you give your side a bit of an arch, it's going to help stabilize the piece. It's the same thing as the Romans discovered. Arches are strong. So that is actually another reason, in addition to the aesthetics, why I bent that butt area a little bit. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to kind of place it for now. And move this so that you can see it from this angle. So I've just kind of placed it, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to carefully, I'm going to start down here at the base. I'm going to push it into the clay. And then I'm going to squish this together. Okay. Now, before I do anything else, I am going to reinforce those corners. So, and this is another reason why having leather hard clay is really important, because I can let that sit and it's not going to flop. I can also bend it and it's not cracking, right? So it's this brilliant halfway point that I'm maximizing the usefulness of the clay at that particular moment. And so feeling not just with your mind but with your body what leather hard feels like is pretty important. This is getting kind of dry, so I'm actually going to wrap it up in some plastic. And then I'll come back to it in just a second. I just don't want it to get too dry. What I'm going to do is I'm taking squishy clay and see if I can go like that. There we go. Okay, I'm taking squishy clay, and I'm going to do something called rolling a coil. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of clay, and I'm pushing down with my fingers, and I'm kind of pulling back. It's not important that you get it perfect. The most important thing is that it's relatively even. And now what I'm going to do, see how I'm kind of laying it into this corner? What I'm doing is I'm pushing, so I'm holding my hand against on the outside, and I'm pushing that coil into the seam, and I'm going to try and do that for all the seams. There's going to be a few seams that you can't get to because you're going to close your section. Like this is going to be, I will probably not be able to get a coil into some part of it here, but I'm going to try really hard to get coils into as many of the parts as I can to reinforce the seams. So now I'm going up in this corner here. You might be asking me, or yourself, where's the plant going to come out, Anna? It's a good question. I'm going to cut a hole right here and have the plant come out here, right? So it's going to kind of grow out of its little back area. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I've got my finger wet, and I'm going to go back in and just kind of really squish that seam into place. So I'm smoothing it out, but more than that, I'm compressing it. So remember that word compression? It's kind of a big deal in clay. And don't mistake compression for its sort of aesthetic outcome. There are, like, it smooths it, but that's not what I'm after right now. I can go back and smooth it later on. What I'm trying to do is actually push those molecules into place in a very specific way. So, now I have 3 sides put together. I'm going to grab this other half, and I am going to score. I'm going to score. You might be wondering, why didn't you score this when it was laying down? You can, totally fine. I like to freshly slip it though, like right before I squish it together, because the slip can kind of dry out a little bit. If you're not careful, like if it takes a long time to get your pieces scored and slipped, by the time you get to the one that you started with, it's dried out. So that's why I do it kind of as I go. Okay. Who's got questions as I'm doing this? Go ahead and just shout them out.
If we roll out our slabs today and seal them up, will they still be the right consistency to be molding them on Monday?
Good question. Yeah, let me repeat that for anybody who's like listening on the video. So if you were to roll out your slabs today and seal them up, would they be the right consistency by Monday? So today's Wednesday. I'm having a hard time answering that question a little bit because honestly, it depends on how close you are to that vent right there. So there's a vent on the wall that it spews out extremely warm, dry air. And I had some students whose work were right underneath that last semester, and they would leave their work out, and like an hour later it would be completely dry. It was just totally insane. And we finally figured out what it was. So it's a little tricky because the humidity in here is not high, and if you were to roll out your slabs and put them on a piece of wood and like put a piece of plastic over them really tightly, I think they'd be fine. So that's my non-answer. Yeah, my recommendation is to roll out slabs, put them on a board, compress them, let them sit out for like 2 or 3 hours, and then put plastic on top of them overnight, and then the next morning they will pretty much be perfect. But if you can't do exactly that, I would say you could totally give it a try. Putting plastic over them and seeing what happens when you come back on a Monday. There's a decent chance that they'll be okay. Okay, so I am going to slip this section here. Okay. And I'm going to slip this. Or I mean not slip, I'm going to... Okay. And so you do not have to get your whole thing put together all at once. Like you might, if you have everything ready to go when you come back on Monday, there's a decent chance that you could spend the class period working, because you're gonna have mostly a work day on Monday, and that you'd get pretty close to finishing the assembly part of your piece. But you don't have to. You can wrap this up and keep going with it. What I'm going to make sure I do, though, is wrap this piece up. If I don't finish working on it, I'm going to wrap these edges up super, super tight and maybe even spray a little bit of water on them. We have spray bottles, so this is starting to get dried out. You don't want to put a ton of water on it because if it gets really wet, it'll just kind of start to disintegrate, which is not great, right, for your structure. But you can absolutely spray water on it to help get the edges wet again so that they don't dry out. And then you can wrap it super well with plastic. These water bottles exist over in that little cubby section. There's like a handlebar, and they just sit right on the handlebar. So that's where you can find them, and then please put them back there. And then, so I just wanted to show you This is the piece that I started yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to actually use this plastic to cover this guy up. I don't want it to get too dried out. I'm going to move this so you can see it. There we go. Great. So you can see how I cut a hole here. And I don't know if you can see that this little part right here, I really like the idea of creating like a three-dimensional form here. And so what I did was I just kind of marked where those haunches are, and then I started to push the clay out from the inside to create this like little haunch. And then you can also push it in from the outside to give it some dimension here. And so any part of your surface that you want to adjust, so I'm thinking caterpillar. Wait a second. Who's got caterpillar? Nope. Oh my gosh, but that's gorgeous. I love that. Who's got the caterpillar? Where's the caterpillar? Very hungry caterpillar? Did they leave? Oh man. It's going to be so cool. It's like the very hungry caterpillar, right? So you can like start to create little ridges to create sort of like little bumps. So you may find on your cloud piece, if that's the one that you decide to do, that it's going to look kind of flat until you go back in and actually start to kind of give it some volume. And that's where you want to make sure that your clay doesn't get too dried out. You, with that piece, may find that very soft leather hard, like only leaving your clay out for maybe even an hour or two, is going to be like sort of where it's at. And you may also find that slightly thinner clay is going to go around that edge a little bit more. So I can help you if you're having trouble with those. But yeah, you can totally do that. That is going to be really fun to figure out how to get the clay to bend and then sort of sit and then get put together. So we can work on that. That'll be really great. But there's lots of ways. So with the leaves, I was excited about your leaves because what you can do is you don't have to have straight, flat slabs. You can start to bend them and move them and give them some volume. And then the other thing, with some of you that have edges, crowns, leaves, where are some other people that have things that point up? What's that over there? Those ears? Ears. So what you can do, I'm just going to cut a little piece of clay and show you. How about this? I'll cut a leaf shape out. Can't see that. There we go. All right. So pretend I'm going to make a leaf something or other. So I'm going to cut a leaf shape. And, okay, so I have these kind of flat edges. I'm going to dip my finger in some water, and I'm going to squish the edge as the thing is laying flat. So can you see how I can get that really nice edge? And I'm going to do it over here. And then you ready for the best trick of the day? I'm going to do it on the other side. Okay, and so anybody who has edges that stick up, think about what you want that edge to be. Like, do you want it to be really sharp and kind of edgy and pointy? Totally fine. It is a decision to have that happen, though. Or do you want it to be kind of rounded? I would say ears and leaves and things like that, maybe go for rounded. And then you also have the option, I'm going to compress this a little bit more. The more it's compressed, the more you can bend it. But then you have the option, are you ready for this? I'm going to put my thumb in the water, and you can like bend the clay, right? So you can kind of get it to do different shapes. It can bend like this, right? And this is that leather hard stuff. I'm just kind of spending some time coaxing it into this shape, right? So with yours, the one, I should put it in front of the camera so that the camera knows what I'm talking about. But there's a student who has a piece that the clay kind of bends down around like this. It goes whoop. So what you might consider doing is starting with a leather hard piece of clay, but then adding water to it to get it to do whatever shape you want it to do, right? So these like extra little sort of bits and bobs can happen when the clay is constructed and or when you are like kind of, I could set this aside to get work on my other leaves to then put them together, right? The other thing that you can do, and I'm going to show you this on Monday, so I'm just going to let you know that this is possible, is you can take either a slab or other, even just a hunk of clay, and I don't actually really know what a capybara ear looks like, but let's pretend I do, right? Oops. Right, so I can make this, and then remember that slipping and scoring thing? Totally slip and score this ear on. I could even integrate it into the form, right? So there are things that you can add on later very quickly and easily. And what I would recommend is to simplify your form as much as possible, and then think about how you want to add those things on later, okay? So you don't necessarily have to cut like all the little feet and ears and tiny little bits and bobs out of your slabs. You can add those in later with a slab or even just by hand modeling them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on Monday. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Okay, we are at 2:15. You have a bunch of studio time, like open studio time. If you want to stick around and roll out your slabs, you can. I will recommend that you come to class on Monday with slabs that are close to ready to go, because then you will be able, I'll be able to walk around, and you're going to have mostly a work day on Monday where you're going to be able to cut out your slabs and get working on them. You can work on them before Monday as well, but you will definitely have class time on Monday to work on your pieces and get help with them, okay? So use the class time wisely by having leather hard slabs ready to go by Monday and your templates ready to go, so that as you're cutting things out and needing some help and maybe even a second set of hands, you can yell and I'll come running. Okay? Questions? Yeah?
If we come on our own time and make slabs, we just claim a spot.
Yeah. So this class has yet to claim spots, correct? Okay, so we're going to start by filling out the shelves all the way to the wall over here. And if you're tall, take a tall one. If you're small, take a small one. There are Sharpie markers. Please put your name on one of those pieces of tape, and that's your spot. And let me know if we run out of space, and we'll figure out where to go next. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I will be posting this video to D2L.